Hi everyone, I'm Melissa Fleming, the UN Undersecretary General for Global Communications. Welcome to Digital Equity. Should internet access be free for everyone? Our live stream, part of the Global Stage series from GZERO Media and Microsoft, will seek to answer that provocative question as we explore the many reasons why the digital divide is widening into a chasm, and what can be done to bridge it before it's too late. Over the course of this hour, we'll bring you conversations with leaders and key influencers in technology from both the public and private spheres. And to kick us off, I'm joined by Amaka Anku, the head of Eurasia Group's Africa practice, and Vickie Robinson, here with me in the studio, the general manager of Microsoft's Airband initiative, one private sector effort to bring affordable connectivity to communities around the world. Vickie, 3.7 billion people lack reliable internet access globally. That is half the world's population. Why is that a problem?
Well, Melissa, it's a huge problem because internet connectivity is literally the foundation of how we participate in our global society. And so if you it's ground zero. It's the foundation upon which all other things rest. And so if you have 49% of the world that is unconnected, and going against that, an increasing digitization, it's a huge problem because it means that they're going to be left further and further behind. It's something that we have absolutely got to get our arms around sooner rather than later.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I know you're working on that. What are barriers, though, to getting half the population connected?
There are several barriers. I think what we tend to see happening is a lot of focus on infrastructure and networks, and that's absolutely critical. We do need to get our arms around that, but it's not just about access and the networks. We need to think about access in the sense of how do we get people with affordable services and devices. Access is a component of that. Then there's readiness, right? The skilling component. How do you actually use the technology once you are connected? And then the last piece that does function as a barrier to connectivity really centers around applications and getting people trained up around how do you use connectivity once you're online with the device and the basic skills to use it in a way that can transform lives. So it's a many-fold problem, but we're certainly poised to get our arms around it, I think.
Yeah, well, that's good. I know that there are a lot of efforts, but thanks for talking to us about the complexity of it, and we'll get into that a bit more. But absolutely. I want to show viewers a map of broadband coverage globally. Vickie and Amaka, what does this data visualization tell you? Amaka, I'm going to bring you in here. In this pandemic, technology has proven to be a lifeline, actually, from remote work and learning to being able to Zoom with our loved ones. But what impact did the lack of technology have on those who aren't connected?
Very significant, Melissa. So as Vickie was saying, look, internet has become, almost a necessity. Not having access to reliable internet locks people out of opportunities, all kinds of opportunities, educational opportunities, employment opportunities, remote work, financial services. We're seeing today that there are, right now there's anecdotal evidence of people in Abuja and Lagos getting jobs to work in Europe. That only happened because of the pandemic, but only people who have access to internet can get those kinds of remote opportunities. And there are lots of other examples. So it's extremely significant, and it has significant productivity implications as well.
So another factor for how people are being left behind, others getting opportunities, all dependent on access to connectivity. Vickie, you've described digital equity as having three key pillars. That isn't just about broadband access. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. Rightly so, the first thing that we need to get our arms around is broadband access. But it's literally only one side of the coin. we must have equal, if not more, focus on how do we get people to actually adopt the services once you actually have the access to the broadband. And so if we think about it as 3 legs of the stool, so the first leg is around access. Getting access to affordable, robust internet connectivity is absolutely critical to address digital inequity. The next component is around devices. You need internet-capable devices so that you can actually use the connectivity as it becomes available. And then the last component is around skilling. And so it's literally these 3 things that are necessary to go from a state of inequity, where you have people where you have access and they still can't adopt, which actually increases the gap. As more people as access is provided more and more in the world and people are not adopting, you actually increase the gap. And so you need to really think about these issues as being much more nuanced, broadband and adoption, which requires us to think about the services again, devices, and the skilling. That's what we mean when we're saying pursuing digital equity, addressing all 3 things in a comprehensive way.
Okay, so thanks, Vickie. Connectivity, devices, skills. I think from my perspective, heading communications at the UN, I would like to add one more. That's
Absolutely.
Media literacy.
Yes.
At this time of disinformation, misinformation, make sure when people do get connected, they know how to advocate in a healthy way.
That's right.
The internet. Great. Well, ahead of this live stream, we asked our audiences on social media for their thoughts on some of the big questions we're tackling. One question we posed was simply, should internet access be free for everyone? Yes or no? But before I reveal how people voted on social media, I'm going to ask Vickie and then Amaka to tell me what they think about this yes or no answer. How would you have voted?
It would have been a hard vote because I think it's a yes, but. I think the more appropriate lens is, should the internet be accessible for all? Look, the reality is that it costs money to build and maintain networks. And there has to be some way to recoup those costs for operators who are doing this very important work to keep us all connected. And if you have a framework in which you're simply saying that the end users will in no instance ever bear any costs, or they can get it for free, I think that framework could have some unintended consequences. You talked about how it's important to be literate from a news perspective. If you have a framework which the internet is free for all, do we lose some freedoms with that kind of framework? Do we lose the innovation? Do we use the use of the internet as a tool for empowerment? I think you have to weigh those consequences. And then just more practically, I have internet in my home. And so is it fair for me, and I have the means, and we have lots of connectivity, 5, 6 devices. Is it relevant and necessary for me to be part of that group that's getting internet access for free? And I would say it's probably not the best use of public resources. And so we should be focused on how do we reach people who are income insecure, who don't have the ability, and who need a bit more help in order to be online.
That makes more sense. So free for those who need it and not those who don't. Thanks a lot, Vickie. I'd like a reaction from Amaka.
Yeah, so I totally agree with Vickie. It has to be paid for. So until there is a viable kind of financial model to ensure that somebody can pay for it, my answer would be no, it should not be free for everybody. And speaking of unintended consequences, I'm from Nigeria, where we've tried to have sort of free or cheap electricity for everybody, and effectively nobody gets electricity because you need to have actual, profits or returns to incentivize the investments you need in the infrastructure that needs to be built to get internet or electricity to anybody, right? So my answer would be no. We're not at the stage yet that the access is still so low that you need to pay for it, right? And I would agree with Vickie's point that we should be thinking about how to make it more accessible, right, rather than free.
Okay, so those accessible and possibly free for those who don't have the funding to pay for it. Otherwise, those who do should pay up so we can continue to invest. So, okay, let's see if the audience agreed with you. They didn't hear your comments first, but let's see the answers. While 82% of respondents said that the internet should be free for everyone, and only 18% said it should not be. So we'll take that into account going forward, but it does show that people around the world want to see more access and affordable access for those who need it. Vickie and Amaka will be with me for the hour, but I'd like to bring in Jessica Rosenworcel, who is the acting chairwoman of the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, in the United States. Her official bio begins by saying she believes, quote, "the future belongs to the connected." Let's discuss how to make that a reality. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
For those of you who may not fully understand the role of the FCC, what role the FCC plays in internet infrastructure and policy, Jessica, could you please briefly explain?
Sure. The FCC is the United States independent regulator of communications. So we're the nation's expert when it comes to communications. We deal with all things wired and wireless, with satellite systems, with fiber facilities. You can think of us as the pipes and not the platforms. But obviously this pandemic has brought the work of the FCC front and center. As a nation, of course, we've had to go online for so much of modern life. And we have shone a light on the reality that not everyone can get there. And as we turn from treating broadband as a luxury good to a necessity, we are trying to develop new strategies to make sure it can reach everyone, everywhere.
Well, thanks for that, Jessica. And early in the program, I showed a map of broadband coverage globally. I want to now zoom in on the United States and look at the coverage there. Look at this, Jessica and everybody. And Jessica, please tell us what story emerges from this image for you.
Well, in a single word, I would say incomplete. And that's not just because broadband has not reached everywhere in the United States. I think it's also because the data you're demonstrating in that map has some fundamental flaws. It's a map that was developed during the last administration, and it's premised on a statistical methodology that I think needs an upgrade. The information there assumes that if there's a single subscriber in a census block, that broadband's available throughout. So in some small rural location, it can mean if there's a household or a business that has service, the map assumes that service is available throughout the town. And you don't have to be a data maven to understand that that likely overstates service. And as a result, I think we have to develop better systems with more pinpoint accuracy, because we're never going to manage the problems we don't measure. And we have got to have a truly honest and accurate accounting of where broadband is and is not for us to tackle this problem in the United States.
Well, thanks, Jessica. It sounds like you're assuming the problem is actually worse than that map depicts. Well, President Biden's infrastructure bill originally included $100 billion for broadband infrastructure. That was stepped back to $65 billion after bipartisan negotiations. How and where will that money be used, and will it address the big problem that you just described?
Yeah, that's a really important point. It is still in the legislative process, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. But I will say this, $65 billion is an opportunity for generational change. I think that is a large sum of money, and it is designed to make sure we get to what I call the 100% policy in the United States, which is 100% of our households should have access to affordable and reliable broadband. I think the challenge will come in making sure that all the programs that are in that legislation and all prior programs work together like pieces of a puzzle. So we're going to have to make sure in the United States to put a lot of effort into that coordination. I know the Federal Communications Commission is absolutely committed to doing that, because we really do think we have to set the goal of 100% and make it happen.
It's very ambitious. While broadband expansion to rural areas is one concern, of course, another is providing more affordable access to millions of Americans, including those in urban areas. how, Jessica, will the FCC ensure that the so-called digital digital redlining doesn't occur? Maybe you could describe that term as well, because I even stumbled over it. That internet service providers don't just improve quality of broadband in affluent areas while ignoring lower income communities.
Oh, I think you just defined it fairly well right there. But I think what it tells us is that for a long time we thought of the digital divide as an issue strictly of deployment, that there were places that didn't have the infrastructure and we needed to build it. But what we're starting to recognize is we've got to tackle another problem, and that's affordability. There are many households in the United States that are struggling to put groceries on the table during this pandemic, and we want to figure out how we can still keep them online, because again, so much of modern life has moved online, and if they want to fully participate in civic and commercial culture, we've got to make sure that they have affordable and reliable access to broadband. So in the United States, we did something big. We set up the nation's largest ever broadband affordability program. And we did that just a few months ago at the FCC. It is a program that supports low-income households, offers them about $50 a month for broadband service. And that number goes up to $75 a month on our tribal lands. And there's also an opportunity for a discounted laptop or tablet computer, so there's a device component. But if you stand back and look at it, what you recognize is we have tried to tackle for the first time ever the issues with the digital divide associated with affordability, because we've recognized it's a really big part of getting 100% of our households connected.
I want to thank you very much, Jessica. I want to bring back Vickie Robinson from Microsoft here too. And it seems like also that the pandemic has been a bit of a wake-up call, but perhaps you want to speak to that and also react to what Jessica has just said.
Well, Jessica's an esteemed former colleague, and she certainly has it right. And I think there's a lot of alignment in terms of how we see the problem set. Absolutely, this has been exacerbated by the pandemic. And the focus has been around access, but you have to tackle affordability. And for us, affordability translates into how you get more people to adopt the services. And so we're certainly trending in the right direction. It's unfortunate that it took a pandemic in some instances to really highlight these issues in this manner, but perhaps that's the light, the sunlight that comes out of this situation, and it's been really a place of darkness, is that it makes it abundantly clear that we cannot just focus on access. People need to actually be able to adopt and get online, and we have to do it now.
Right. Okay. Well, one good thing out of this pandemic. Jessica Rosenworcel, acting chairwoman of the FCC, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We're widening our lens now from the US to the situation globally and the political issues at stake as broadband expands within the developing world. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently sat down with Ian Bremmer, president of GZERO Media and Eurasia Group, for a wide-ranging interview ahead of the UN General Assembly. Here's some of what he had to say about the issue of digital equity.
One of the things that the United Nations has tried to do is provide a level of digital equity around the world. How much progress are you able to make?
The progress has not been fantastic in the recent past. We have a program. The program is to reach global connectivity in 2030. We have several entities pushing strongly in that direction. I believe that there is an understanding of the industry that is very important, and I hope that we'll be able to boost our capacity to support all different actors and instigate others to do more in order to be able to reach that global connectivity.
That was the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in conversation with Ian Bremmer. Continuing this thread on the global impact of connectivity, I want to bring in Doreen Bogdan-Martin, the Director of the Telecommunication Development Bureau of the International Telecommunication Union. Welcome, Doreen.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Great to be here. Thank you.
First, let's not assume everyone watching knows exactly what ITU the organization that you lead is responsible for. Can you just briefly explain its function and mission?
Yes, of course. So ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, is the UN specialized agency for ICTs. We're actually the oldest in the UN system before the UN, dating back to 1865 at the time of the telegraph. And of course, fast forward to today, it's all about digital and of course, all about what our previous speakers were mentioning, bringing the internet to everyone, everywhere. We have 193 governments. We have 800 private sector members, 150 academic institutions. And I like to think we make sure that people are able to use their phones, to watch TV, to listen to the radio, use the internet, because we work on connecting everyone through standards, radio communications, and of course our work and development. So the mundane things like radio waves or parking satellites in space, we manage those orbital slots, and of course those networks cannot connect or have to connect without a hitch, and that comes in with our standards piece. So that's our mission. I think based on what the previous speaker said about COVID being the wake-up call, I would argue that our mission has really never been more important than it is today.
Indeed, and thanks so much for describing it. I think you're speaking to us from headquarters in Geneva. Doreen, you've been quoted as saying that getting the remaining half of the world's population online will create, quote, a whole different ballgame. How so?
So we have 3.7 billion people that have never, ever connected. And on top of that, we have this whole hundreds of millions of people that actually experience connectivity that's too slow, that's too expensive, and doesn't really have a meaningful impact on their lives. I think, again, coming back to COVID, we saw what it meant to not be connected. We saw what it meant to the lives of those that were digitally excluded. And so imagine if we can connect those 3.7 billion people. We will not have children that will be deprived of their learnings. We will not have people that have to leave their jobs because they don't have connectivity. It is a game changer. The UN Secretary General has said the digital divide is this big digital Grand Canyon, and indeed it is, because the task is really huge. And when we look at the 46 least developed countries, only 4 out of 5 people are connected, and 1 out of every 7 women is connected in an LDC. So we have so much to do. We need to work on that affordability piece, as the other speakers have said. We have a Broadband Commission target of 2% monthly GNI. Again, if we look at the LDCs, the average is about 14% monthly GNI, with some countries like at 30%. So we got to get that affordability issue down so that the services and the devices are accessible to those that can best use them to change their lives.
What do you see as the greatest challenges? I mean, you outlined what the challenges are, but what are the greatest challenges to connect people universally, and how do we get there? How do we build the bridge across that digital Grand Canyon?
We need investment. We said we need $428 billion in investment, and that's on the infrastructure piece. But we also need to work on that demand piece, the usage piece. So that involves huge investment in the digital skills piece, in ensuring that that the devices, of course, are affordable and accessible, that we stimulate the development of local content in local languages, and that we have the enabling policy and regulatory frameworks that are going to bring that investment forward. I think no one can do this alone. We need all hands on deck. We need the UN system united. We saw the Secretary General launching a call for a digital compact in his common agenda launch last week. So we need to bring the UN, the governments, the private sector, civil society, academia, the IFIs, the MDBs, we all need to come together and get this done. And we need new models for investment. We need creative thinking. We need to revamp universal service funds. We need to look at how we can sort of expand the pool of of contributions that comes in to support connectivity. And I think great models like our partnership with UNICEF, where we've combined forces to connect every school on the planet to the internet and every young person to information, opportunity, and choice, known as GIGA, is one great step forward where we can bring partners together and make an impact and close that divide.
I see Vickie was rigorously nodding her head to what you were saying. Vickie, how do you react to what you just heard?
First, I want to say this problem is absolutely difficult, but I'm so inspired because there's so much consistency in what everyone is saying here. We have clarity around what the problem is, and we're aligned in ways that I haven't seen. This has been my life's work, and I have not seen the stars align this way where there's that much clarity as to like where we need to go to be able to solve this problem once and for all. So I feel inspired that we have such a common thread globally around how we need to treat these issues. Now, as Doreen said, we do need all hands on deck. Everyone has to roll up their sleeves and get to the hard work of solving this problem once and for all. I don't want my grandchildren experiencing this issue. It's time to close the gap once and for all.
Yeah, it sounds also, I mean, we're here, this is a Microsoft partly sponsored event, and Doreen was saying we need not just the UN, but also the private sector. So it's great to see this alignment and also just agreement. I wonder if Amaka also wants to come in and react to what Doreen has just outlined.
Yes, sure. So, I mean, I totally agree, of course, with everything everyone has been saying. And I would just point out that it's in the interest, right, of both the global tech companies and wealthier countries to advance accessibility. If you look at a country like Nigeria, the largest market in Africa, 240 million people or so, about 60% of people have access, but not that many people use it because of cost. The biggest challenge is cost, right? And so if the biggest sort of constraint on the growth of the services that tech companies can provide, and of course the other end is then the productivity gains that people can realize, is cost of accessing internet. So it's in everybody's interest. It's in the interest of global prosperity, which obviously helps with safety and global safety and peace and so on and so forth. It's in everybody's interest to expand access.
That's really good to hear. I might want to come to the question though, but why is it in a company's interest, not just for the global public good, but perhaps could it be profitable? Do you want to just quickly react to that before we go to our latest viewer poll? Vickie?
Happy to react to that. Listen, a company like Microsoft is premised and built on expanding access to digital technologies. To be able to do that, people must be online, right? And so it's this, I call it a wonderful problem, where for us, it's a matter of absolutely our business as a tech company is to expand access to digital technologies, full stop. We're also about empowering people. And so it's this wonderful place where you have sort of the business, meaning with our company purpose and mission coming together. Even taking a step back, or maybe it's actually going a step further. The tech sector in particular has been a big part of the digitization. So it only makes sense that we would want to be involved in continuing it, and with that comes great responsibility. So it's really both sides of it. We benefit from it, but we also have some responsibility to ensure that it increases and it becomes more accessible for everyone. Everyone should be able to get on the internet.
Yeah, well, I think that is absolutely one thing we all agree on here. Let's go to another viewer poll. Ahead of this live stream, we asked viewers, quote, is US-China tech competition good for the world? It is a yes or no question. Let's see what the viewers said. Here we go. 61% said competition between US and China is good, and only 39% said it was bad. So That's interesting to see. Amaka, this is a topic GZERO will dive deeper into the future in their live streams. But for now, what are your thoughts on that answer and how it pertains to this conversation?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised to see that it was 61% good, but I happen to agree. I think again, it all depends on your perspective, of course. If you're at the periphery of the world economy, as people in developing countries are, competition between the two sort of largest countries and with the greatest tech capacities is helpful because it increases your leverage. Right. And so, I think it's good. I don't know if it's good for the world. That there's certainly aspects that could be bad for the world, obviously, right, which we can get into. But I think from the perspective of developing countries, it's helpful to have more competition because it gives you more options, right, in terms of people to fund the infrastructure that we're talking about. Today or yesterday, the EU just came out with the global gateway to compete with China's BRI, and the U.S. came out with a Build Back Better for the World. So I think this is good for increasing access. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting, Doreen. What is the path to ensuring a free and open internet globally, and how and when are the kinds of norms created that are necessary for such universal access?
Well, I think the moment is now. Again, because of COVID, this urgency is there. So, we can't wait another 5 years. We have to be taking actions now. And so as multilateral, multi-stakeholder institutions, we need to start engaging with our stakeholders and really trying to forge the way forward. We have launched a Partner to Connect digital coalition that we're very excited about. We have a side event coming up in a couple of days, and we are bringing all stakeholders together. It's an open invitation to make pledges and commitments in the space of connecting people, empowering communities, building digital ecosystems, and incentivizing investments. Because we believe that it's not just about words, it has to be about concrete actions. We want commitments, we want pledges, so that in a couple of years we can say we made a difference. And of course, by 2030, as the UN Secretary General has challenged us, we can have the whole world connected in an affordable and accessible and an inclusive way.
Okay, well, indeed, we need private and public connectivity, and we will definitely look out for that new initiative. I often have, in my experience, the private sector has wanted to become involved and sometimes don't really know how. So finally, both for Doreen and for Vickie, what do you see as the ideal partnership between private and public entities in this space, and how much responsibility and burden should big tech have? Let me start out with Vickie and then over to Doreen.
I think that it's absolutely critical that everyone roll up their sleeves. This is not going to get done by solely actions in the public sector. You do need the private sector involved as well. I think it's a bit of probably a missed opportunity to just focus on one component of the private sector, the tech sector. I think that we all benefit from a more connected world. And as a result, we all bear some level of responsibility to getting us to that place. And so if we are to solve this, and I believe it's totally solvable, we need private and the public sector working in lockstep to get this done. And we have so many examples, Melissa, of seeing this in practice through some of our projects. It really does work, and it really does make the difference, whether it's the private sector coming in from an investment standpoint or innovation and technologies, and the public sector coming in with commitments around how to actually get things done. And implementing codified universal service programs. That is the key, I think, to closing the digital divide once and for all, and getting to that space of digital equity for all.
Okay, thanks, Vic. So we're only going to get there in lockstep. I wonder if, Doreen, you want to have a couple of last comments on what Vickie just said?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I would say we're only going to achieve the SDGs if we have digital at the core. And of course, we are wearing our pin, and some call it the SDG 0, the invisible SDG, or SDG 18 that we wanted to have at the Broadband Commission. But we need digital to help us in each and every one of the 17 goals. And I think as we look about how to do this, we need to remember that it's not just digital as a silo, it's across everything. And so the importance of taking whole of government approaches, of taking whole of society approaches, making sure that we look at digital transformation and how it cuts across every sector so that we can come up with solutions that countries and communities can adapt with different stakeholders and different partners at the table. I think we've got some great examples, digital building block exercises that we've done with different partners, working in Niger and doing smart village projects where we bring the connectivity and then we work with the community and the private sector to roll out local, relevant, community-driven applications for those that need it. So I think there's lots of solutions, but we have to remember that it's about everything in our lives. I think it's our whole society that we're talking about.
Doreen Bogdan-Martin, thank you so much for joining us and also for bringing in the SDGs. You're sitting in front of an SDG backdrop, and now we know why. You believe that digital underpins all the 17 goals. So thank you very much for your time and explaining also the important work of the ITU in getting everyone connected by 2030.
Thank you so much, Melissa.
Next, we turn to technology and tech infrastructure. What will it take to bring affordable broadband access to more places in the world? Vuyani Jarana is the chairman of Mobax Group, a telecommunications company based in South Africa that has a presence across the African continent. Welcome. Vuyani, nice to see you.
Thank you very much.
You're speaking to us from South Africa.
Yes, I'm in Johannesburg, and thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Great. Well, Vuyani, first tell us a bit about the connectivity situation in Africa. Where are the challenges, and also maybe where are the opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's a well-known fact that the African continent, because of the history of lack of investment, adopted a mobility-first infrastructure rollout because of the rapid nature of the deployment and the ability to cover wide areas through radio network. However, if you look at where we are now as a continent, the demand for broadband is higher, which means heavy investment in the underlying layer of fixed broadband, fixed wireless broadband to support mobility or mobile networks becomes key. So we have to do what Europe and the US did many years ago of investing in underlying fiber infrastructure to support 5G deployment, but most importantly, to provide the reliable, large-scale fixed broadband to the home. And that covers both urban and peri-urban areas as well as deep rural areas. So there's a lot of work to be done. So I think there's a lot of investment needed in the continent, and including South Africa.
Thank you for that. Who is going to invest, first of all, and also what do you see as the role and responsibility of a company like Mobax in the expansion of broadband access?
I think from
we're losing, we've lost your sound. Is it possible that you have muted for a minute? I think while we get you back connected. Yes, we hear you again. Okay. Go ahead, please answer.
Yes. We are a multi-services company that provides infrastructure to telco industry as a whole. And the opportunities therefore is how we can build and support large-scale infrastructure or telco or network operators to actually rapidly deploy infrastructure. I do think, though, that the big issue is around how we expand broadband to deep rural areas and as well as the townships in South Africa and the rest of the continent. New models of investment needs to be established. I think that a number of small players who are wireless internet service providers and new fixed broadband providers needs to be supported So there's policy instrument on the other side that government has around licensing commons like spectrum, waylives, rights of way to invest, environmental impact assessment. Government needs to focus on that and say, I can do this and I can support industry, I can support the small area-based, regional-based players who can work with the big players who have the large-scale backbone infrastructure. At the same time, there is a need for the big tech companies, what I call the digital titans, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, IBM, and many others, as well as the multilateral organizations like the ITU, the UN, World Bank, IFC, to find new social impact investment models that begins to create quasi-equity instruments to allow the small startups that can target the areas where the big guys are not focusing on to actually invest in those areas, blending mainstream commercial bank debt instruments with a quasi-equity instrument that would come from what I call the big tech companies. Also, even beyond, like Vickie said, even beyond the big tech, there are companies in mining that have got social responsibility. They have a local labor environment that is changing because of digitization and automation. They should be looking at how to invest in those communities, the host communities for labor. How do we put infrastructure for fixed broadband? And they don't need to do it on a charitable basis. They could create instrument for impact investment instrument, almost like soft loans, quasi-equity instruments, and give it to the small guys to invest and begin to digitize those communities. So I think a lot needs to be done around beyond just getting us together to talk. Let's create the quasi-equity instrument. And I'm glad Microsoft is already on that path. They are thinking ahead. They are looking at quasi-equity instruments to support the small startups who will cover the last mile coverage of the next million of people in South Africa and in the continent.
That's a fascinating investment model that actually starts local and then pulls out to global. I'm going to ask, because you did mention Microsoft, is this a model that speaks to you, Vickie?
It does. I think that, we're obviously already investing in this space, but we recognize and we use our investment, whether they're financial or in kind, really as being catalytic to help our partners that are working at the hyper local or regional level to get other investment, whether it's public or private. I do think it's a good model generally to approach this problem set. And again, we're not shirking our responsibility. We do believe that there's a role for the private sector, including the tech sector, to step up. And we have had some great experience in this space using this multi-stakeholder approach where you have investments and funding coming in from many different sources that translate into success and models that are actually repeatable across the world.
Okay, well that's good. So how far are we along in Africa? Let's go back to our guest in South Africa. Is this just a theoretical model, or is it already being rolled out?
No, it's not a theoretical model. We are seeing Microsoft, working with some of the startups who are busy working on outside the Mobax portfolio to actually do almost big investment in terms of the early business planning, concept design. But we think that there is an opportunity to step up the engagement, and because digitization is key. So if you look at how education and healthcare is developing in the continent, there's history of underinvestment in traditional models of schools, lack of infrastructure, lack of hospitals and clinics. Digital will help to move education from brick and mortar to the home, healthcare from doctors' rooms and hospitals to the home. Now, if we don't find instruments that makes it affordable through market-based competition, bringing in many small players that are regional that we can compete and push pricing down, and we enable them through what I call impact investment approach led by big business. Government creates the instrument for ease of doing business, spectrum allocation, move away from auctions, continue to look at offsets around social impact. So by big guys, big players that get given the spectrum. So in that way, we'll bridge the divide. I don't think it's about it being free. It's about being affordable. And we must understand the dichotomy in society of the haves and have-nots. So we have to look at this whole notion of commons and see how we can also mutualize the services on the other side so that those who have can actually support the have-not. And government needs to look at for the indigent homes, the internet access as a basic service, where they're actually able to have their children going to school. But government alone giving services on the demand side is not going to help. We have to fix the supply side, bring in market competition, get smaller guys who can provide a service in an area cost effectively and still make margins, not super margins, good enough margin to pay to get a return on investment. So that's what we need to do. But I think the work of Microsoft, we need to encourage and also look at other industries where they have a responsibility in society to look at a different method of social investment, where you put soft equity, soft loans to support industry that is actually doing massive work in changing the life and future of society through digitization.
Thank you so much. I'd love to bring in Amanka now because she is responsible for the Eurasia Group for Africa to get your reaction to this model.
Yeah, I mean, so if I may just add a little bit to what Vuyani was saying, right, in terms of like, to give us a concrete picture of what it takes to get internet to sort of the average person, right? So Africa is a big place, so let me just focus on one country, Nigeria. You need to get, so most people know this, right? Like internet is actually physical infrastructure. So you need to get, you know, usually it's a submarine cable from Europe or whatever into like a coastal area. So let's say it's Lagos in Nigeria. And then from that connection, you have to build out connections to different other points around the country. In Nigeria, most internet access is mobile. It's mobile broadband. There's very little fixed broadband for various reasons, and it's more expensive to like put cables all over to people's homes. And so then the telcos have to build transmitter masts around the country so that they can talk to each other. So it's a significant undertaking, right? To Vickie's point about all hands on deck. And I think that this model that Vuyani is talking about is where, you know, you come into say, you know, the telcos have a major role to play because they have to build the transmitter masts. The governments have a major role to play because sometimes they take on the responsibility of taking the connection from the submarine connection to different parts of the country. There's often fees that come along with it, right-of-way fees that governments can reduce to make it easier, right? So yeah, I mean, it's all hands on deck here, but there is, so far we have seen, you know, to Melissa's point about where are we? Where are we in the rollout? We've seen that mobile internet access prices have been falling about 50% every year, right? And I think the question is, can we accelerate that? I know that right now, both Google and Facebook are building their own submarine cables into Africa, and they will probably then offer cheaper access to MTN and other telcos on the condition that they build out the radio transmitter masts all around the country that increase access, right? And then I think there's a role for, to Vickie's point, other private sector players to come in and then say, you know, maybe we can help subsidize access in rural areas, or, you know, and so on and so forth. There's a role for everybody to play here.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amanka. And let's have one final viewer poll. GZERO asked followers on social media, who should pay for universal internet access? The options were governments, technology companies, telco and ISPs, or a combination of all three. First, quick thoughts from the panel. How about you, Vickie?
I hope it's the last category because in my mind, that's the one that makes sense.
Okay, let's bring in Amanka.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, to my point, I was just making this point about how everybody has to chip in. So yes, it's governments, it's tech companies, yes, all of the above.
Okay, I suspect I can guess the answer of Vuyani.
No. I agree. It's all three. Everyone has to play a role. And if everyone plays their role properly, then we can fast track the affordability issue and the rollout. And it's all about being committed to a common goal.
Okay, thank you, Vuyani. We did hear all of you mentioning this in your answers. So here are the results. We'll have them up on the screen. Governments, 20%, tech companies, 8%, telco and ISPs, 32%, and a combination, 40%. Vuyani, Jarana, thank you so much for joining us and for your important work in getting Africa connected. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Before we go today, I want to bring back my intrepid anchor buddies for this hour, Vickie Robinson and Amanka Anku, for some closing thoughts on what they've heard and what we've discussed. So what were your key takeaways from this conversation, Vickie?
One key takeaway is that the moment is now. It's not 5 years from now, the moment is now. We need to really capitalize on this moment and take very specific, concerted steps around getting digital equity for all. So that's a key takeaway. I love that there's alignment to say it can't just be about access and infrastructure. We need to tackle adoption and affordability. So that's another key point, that's a key takeaway for me that's actually validating and inspiring at the same time. And I think lastly, we've been talking about this and you've seen this thread consistently throughout the conversation. All hands on deck. It can't just be the public sector alone, it can't be the private sector alone. You really need everyone locking arms around this shared purpose of what we're going to do to ensure that where we are today is not where we are 5 years from now. So those are my key takeaways.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Vickie. Amaka, would you like to come in and let us know what you thought?
So I think we have a big opportunity to take advantage of the pandemic sort of, the pandemic reminded us of just how important digital access is. And what we've seen in many parts of Africa is that we are seeing ICT sectors grow tremendously, even while other parts of the economy was contracting. So in Nigeria, for example, in 2020, ICT grew 13%. In Ghana, it grew 23% from a low base in Ghana. But, pretty significant in Nigeria. It was already 10% of economic activity. And so I think that there is a major opportunity here, especially for developing countries. Greater internet connectivity can accelerate growth in tremendous ways. It helps to formalize economic activity. Again, for a place like sub-Saharan Africa, the informal economy is like 60%, right? It's very large. It's very hard to tax the informal sector. It's much easier if people are, paying, using digital payments. It gives you a lot more visibility. It helps with regulation. It helps with startups to plan. It helps with predictability. It helps with raising finances. So there's so many multiplier effects here that can really accelerate growth across developing countries and in Africa in particular. So I really hope that this is an opportunity for everybody, like we've been talking about, governments to sit up and pay attention, to reduce obstacles and cut red tape and cut right-of-way fees and do their part to make sure that these investments happen.
Thank you so much. Just, from my side, representing the UN, I have to say this is really encouraging to me. I've worked on refugee issues. We're now working on, for example, girls' education in Afghanistan, where perhaps the only way some girls and young women and university students will be able to continue their education will be through digital access. I was very pleased to hear education mentioned, the pandemic, a wake-up call also in the healthcare area. Digital access can improve healthcare access as well. And there's so many other examples, even in the climate space, how digital can help provide early warnings for changing climate and what's coming. So many examples of what we're working on and how digital underpins our goal to make this world a much more inclusive place, a much more equal place. And I think we have just witnessed the energy that is there, which is We always have it in the UN, and it's just so refreshing to see the private sector, to see groups like the Eurasia Group really committed to working on making this happen. Vickie and Amaka, thank you so much for being with us. GZERO will bring you live programming throughout the year from some of the world's most important political and diplomatic gatherings, the UN General Assembly, which is happening imminently here in New York, COP26, the World Economic Forum in Davos, and more. You can watch their next live stream from the UN General Assembly on Wednesday, September 22nd at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. It's called Unfinished Business: Is the World Really Building Back Better? Head to gzeromedia.com/global stage to learn more. I'm Melissa Fleming, and for all of us here, I'd like to thank you for watching. See you again soon.